Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Today in the Word. We are so glad that you've joined us for this discussion on our study of the Book of Nehemiah. We've titled it, Come, Let Us Rebuild. And with me today is our author, Russ Meek. Russ teaches Old Testament and Hebrew for Moody Theological Seminary. He writes a regular column for Fathom Magazine, and his books include Ecclesiastes and the Search for Meaning in an Upside Down World. He and his wife live with their sons in North Idaho. So welcome, Russ.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're always glad to see our authors, and it's fun to get a little bit of background, especially when we're tackling a book that maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with, Nehemiah. Tell us a little bit about this book, and maybe just a little bit about why you were drawn to write this study.
Sure. So the Book of Nehemiah is kind of a companion volume to Ezra. And so it's Ezra and Nehemiah. It's always they're always together in the Hebrew Bible, and it tells the story of what happens after the exile. So, if you're familiar with like the book of Jeremiah, and all these horrible things happen, and the people are exiled into Babylon, and they're punished for their sin. And it's just a very dark and difficult period for God's people under his discipline. And this story, or this part of the story in Nehemiah, is telling when they come back from exile. So you have them in exile. King Cyrus of Persia takes over the Babylonian Empire, and then he issues this decree and says, hey, you guys can go home. And that's where the book of Ezra is kind of chronicling Ezra's going home. And then Nehemiah comes onto the scene to repair the walls of Jerusalem. And he is a Persian official, so he holds he's called the cupbearer, but it's actually a really high ranking in the Persian government. So he would have had, think of it, not exactly like a chief of staff to the president, but someone who would have had very close, very ready personal access to like the most powerful person in the kingdom.
From what I understand, cupbearers had a responsibility to maybe taste things before the king, or to at least be there to safeguard so they wouldn't be poisoned.
Right, to make sure that the king isn't poisoned and dies. And so, I mean, that's something that I do in my family with my children. I make sure that they taste all of my food. No, I'm just kidding. I don't do that.
I was thinking I had to do that for my husband before. Try this first and see if it's okay. Yeah. But he had a high level, so he was like up close and personal with the king.
Right, exactly. The chronology is kind of difficult to understand, but this king had already halted all of the building in Jerusalem. And so Nehemiah is going to the king and asking him to undo what he'd already done, right? And so you don't really pick that up in the first chapter, but I think it helps to explain like why Nehemiah is saying this like really intense, heartfelt prayer for favor, because he's not just like asking the king to grant him a favor. He's asking the king to undo his previous decree and to allow rebuilding on this project to start.
Yeah, to essentially change his mind, change his position on an important matter then.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And why was this task of rebuilding the wall so important? Why did Nehemiah want to do that?
And so the idea in the ancient world, like around Jerusalem, you have this city where a lot of the people would live, but it's completely unprotected. And so there's no, like, the city walls are there to protect the city from like invaders or people who would come and attack the people or whatever. But if you're just like out in the middle of nowhere with no protection at all, like no no wall around your city, then you're completely vulnerable to attack from like governments, but also just like individual bandits who might come and try to loot the city or steal the livestock or whatever.
Yeah, so he has this big thing, and it's a big job, right? This isn't something he can just go fix on his own or in a quick amount of time.
These guys are rebuilding the wall in 52 days. It's just phenomenal. But the archaeological record shows that there are pieces where it was clearly done like very hastily. Like the work is not as like refined and finished as it would have been in like David's time or Solomon's time.
I think This book may not be top of your list of Bible books you wanted to study, but I think for many of you, it will hit you right where you need to be right now. What are other takeaways maybe that you saw happening as the teacher mind of you as you were writing this? What do you think readers will take away?
Well, I hope that they'll take away, like, I think in every Today in the Word I've written, like, I hope that they will take away, like, God is faithful, God is trustworthy, like, He
Amen.
loves you. He loved Nehemiah, He loved the people of Jerusalem, and He loves us today, and He's trustworthy no matter what. So, like, so many times I think in our lives when we experience a hardship, in my life personally, when I experience a hardship, my first thought is, why is God doing this to me? Like, what sin have I committed to cause this to happen? And like I think those are good questions to ask. Like, God, like the psalmist, like, God, search my heart. But at the same time, like in reading Nehemiah, we see that, like, it's not Nehemiah's sin. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's doing what's right. And so I hope that people will see, like, man, in walking with the Lord, in doing hard things, there will be difficulty, there will be opposition. Jesus promises that there will be persecution. And so let us, like, keep going and keep walking with the Lord, despite those things.
Yeah, yeah, just that encouragement of faithfulness, and you see that I'm like coming to mind some of Paul's writings, and that in the New Testament of that image of perseverance, of staying on course, of finishing the race. Yeah, it's that same idea.
Right, that's right.
Well, I think that's a good word, and I really appreciated the study. It's a good study, and you're right, there's a lot of historical information here, so you could pull out your Bible commentaries or encyclopedias and look up some of this. It may help ground you. But yeah, we thank you, Russ, for writing it, and I encourage all of you to please like these videos and subscribe. It really does help us. And do leave a comment below, who you are and what you faced in terms of overcoming and the tasks that God has sent before you. We can encourage one another and build one another up by hearing each other's testimonies. Thank you, Russ.
Thanks so much.